Hey everyone, and welcome back to another movie from our hot news channel. We will talk about American celebrities who died today and in the last few days, as well as famous people from other countries in this movie. Please show your love and support by giving this movie a like before we go on. It means a lot to us. Thanks, let's get started. In an accident on Deckard 5, Cameron Magnus, 26, died. He was known for singing with Cody Simpson and One Direction. There was a video of her in the water and news of her death on her Facebook page. The letter talked about her as a brave and talented artist whose spirit touched many people. Cameron began working when she was only 8 years old. She sent a tape to the person who would become her manager and then released the song Wait and See. It was later used in the movie Judy Moody and the Not Bummer Summer. Soon, she started putting songs on YouTube, which caught the attention of Grayson Chance and Cody Simpson. They asked her to open for them on tour in 2010, and she did so again in 2012 for Chance. In the same year, she went on One Direction's Up All Night tour and opened 7 shows. In 2013, she went on their Take Me Home tour. She often said that playing for their fans was an experience she would never forget. Cameron kept putting out songs like Now or Never, Lovesick, and Machines. She opened for Fifth Harmony in 2016 and later put out her Love Maps EP. In her obituary, it was said that her voice was an expression of her heart and talent. After Cameron, her parents Sarah and Gary, her brothers Chelsea and Cable, and her fiancé Christian will miss her. She was 60 years old and was best known for her part in The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. She was hit by a car in New York City on Deke Jiggers, 8, while crossing the street. The driver stayed at the spot, and the police are still looking into what happened. In the morning, Davis's neighbors said they had talked to her and remembered how nice and upbeat she was. Davis played a police officer in season 5 of Mrs. Maisel. In what would be her last movie part? Rescue Me, Shame, The Normal Heart, American Odyssey, Blindspot, New Amsterdam, and Girls Viva were just a few of the movies she worked on. Her death comes after the death of Brian Tarantino, who played Jackie in Mrs. Maisel. At the time, the cast and team sent him a heartfelt message to honor him. This showed how close they were as a group on the show. Davis left behind a lot of memorable acts and a big mark on everyone who knew her. Jeff Garcia, who was 50 years old, died early this morning. He was the voice of Sheen in Jimmy Neutron. His son Jojo Garcia told everyone about the news in a sad post full of memories of how close they were. Jojo said that his dad was a unique artist with unmatched heart, drive, and fun. And someone who always made him feel good. Jojo thanked her fans for their support and asked them to please be quiet while her family deals with their loss. The voice of Jimmy Neutron, Debbie Derryberry, also paid respect. She said she was heartbroken and remembered Jeff as the funniest person in the room. His co-star Rob Paulsen also gave him an award. There were reports that Jeff had been having a lot of health problems lately. Even though there isn't an official reason yet. Jeff first became a fan favorite when he voiced Sheen in Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius in 2001. He kept playing the part throughout the TV show and later took over as host of the spin-off Planet Sheen. Barnyard, Back at the Barnyard, Happy Feet, Rio, Rio 2, and other movies had his voice in them. He also had a successful career as a stand-up comedian, where he was known for his quick wit and high energy. Jeff Garcia has left behind millions of fans who grew up laughing with him, as well as characters and acts that will live on forever. For HGTV star Frank Cosolino has died. He was 56 years old. The engineer from Toronto is remembered as a skilled worker who brought good energy to every set and was known for his work on Homes and Holmes Family Rescue. Lisa, his partner, and their girls Philomena and Alexandria will miss him really. In a touching homage, Mike Holmes told of Frank's death and said he was heartbroken. He also said that Frank made every project better. Holmes thought back to how Frank could walk into the hardest job, crack a joke, and make everyone laugh right away. He wrote that Frank would always be a part of the Holmes family. In an additional tape, Holmes talked about how Frank's health had been very bad for a few years, with an unexpected problem that caused him to die en crueur. Holmes also thought about their first meeting, which was more than 20 years ago. He remembered how Frank came to the first meeting ready to help Holmes in need, even though there wasn't any money available. He kept that spirit with him throughout his whole career. Cosolino kept working with the series and made an appearance on Holmes Family Rescue in May 2024. Holmes's kids, Sherry and Mike Jr., also wrote touching notes. HGTV said in a statement that Frank was a great artist who was kind to everyone he worked with and dedicated to his job. Cozzolino also built a successful business called Solutions Electrical, which shows how hard he worked and how skilled he was. People at HGTV and the families he helped will never forget how much he meant to them. The well-known British author Sophie Kinsella has died at the age of 55. Her family told DCT10 that she had died softly, with the things she loved most around her: music, family, love, and happiness. Kinsella, whose real name is Madeline Sophie Wickham, was told in 2022 that she had a very severe form of brain cancer. Her family said she was unbelievably brave while she was sick, and was thankful for her fans, her job, and the people who helped her. Her first big hit was Confessions of a Shopaholic, which was turned into a movie starring Isla Fisher in 2009. Under the name Sophie Kinsella, she created the popular character Becky Bloomwood and wrote 9 more Shopaholic books, as well as many other best-selling books for teens and kids. Kinsella went to Oxford and worked as a business journalist before she became a full-time writer. At age 24, her first book, The Tennis Party, made her famous. Later, she used the pen name Sophie Kinsella to set her earlier, more serious work apart from her lighter love comedies. Kinsella said she loved writing about the wild and exciting years of being a young adult. Her warm and funny style made her famous all over the world. Henry, her husband, and their 5 children will miss her. The happiness her books gave to fans all over the world is what she left behind. 6. Behind his tough, daring exterior, Jorge Illegal was a brilliantly sensitive artist. He was born to stir things up, had a smart mind, and couldn't stop making things. He lived to turn life into music. Bass. Just drums and guitar, nothing else is needed. Over 40 years, he played electric rock music on stages in Spain and other places. Jorge was the heart and soul of Ilegales. He sang lead, played guitar, and wrote famous lines. Songs like New Times, Wild Times, Hello, Mamonset, Everyone is Dead, The Heart is a Strange Animal, and My Life Among the Ants changed the lives of many people and are now part of the past of Spanish music. He was born in Aviles and grew up in Guayjun and Oviedo area. Always different, always interested, and always fierce. He had tried out a lot of different bands and styles before starting Illegals in 1983. Later, he brought old rhythms back to life with the same fire he brought to rock with Jorge Legal y Los Magnificos. He was always changing himself. He didn't look back when the band turned 40 years old. Instead, he put out new music, worked with big names, and proved that rock music stays popular because it speaks to people's basic needs. Jorge did whatever he pleased with his life, making things, trying new things, shocking people, and energizing places. He left behind a body of work that is still full of strength, wit, and attitude. And his spirit comes back to life every time his music plays. She was very good at what she did and taught everyone in Quebec for more than 60 years. Beatrice Picard, an actress, has died at the age of 96. She laughed, "I've always said I'm just a simple grown-up girl who likes to make things harder for myself." Yet, this simple girl had one of the most impressive careers in Quebec show business. She could go to school in Paris when she was 17. She went to the Sorbonne at first, but the famous Jean-Louis Barrault quickly caught her attention in the stage. When she got back to her home country, she started acting in radio plays, which were huge hits in Quebec before TV came along. She quickly became well known, especially for her role as Angelina in the wildly popular TV show Le Servanat. Miss Radio Cinema Television 1958, which she won when she was 29, was a big deal. At the same time, she had her first son and led a daily show on Seacock, which was against the rules because she wasn't married. But Beatrice did not give up. "I was living my life. The rest of my life was mine. Allow people to talk." After having 4 boys, she continued to work hard at a respected job that would leave a lasting mark on Quebec culture. Raoul Malo, the late great singer and Mavericks leader, died at age 60 after a long fight with cancer. Malo was an amazing person who lived his life through music, family, and experience. He was known for having a roaring soulful voice and a lot of energy. Malo grew up in Miami with music from everybody from Hank Williams to Celia Cruz. His parents came from Cuba. When the Mavericks mixed that sound of country rock, Tex-Mex, and Latin beats, they made something completely their own. The band put out more than a dozen records over the course of 40 years, with hits like All You Ever Do Is Bring Me Down. The Country Music Association, the Academy of Country Music, and the Recording Academy all gave them awards. Malo stayed close to music even when she had cancer. Over 30 artists performed at tribute shows at the Ryman Auditorium that were streamed to his hospital room to honor how he affected many generations of fans. Moon and Stars, his last record, came out in 2024. It was the end of a career that changed American music while still honoring its multicultural roots. People all over the world will be moved by Raul Malo's songs, energy, and spirit. Carl Ray Norris was born in Ryan, Oklahoma, on March 10, 1940. This small town would be a small part of the amazing story of the man who would become famous around the world as Chuck Norris. He came into the world during one of the hardest times in American history. The Great Depression was still affecting rural areas strongly. Ryan was a simple town where everyone knew each other and life moved slowly and steadily like the seasons of farming. But for the Norris family, even this simple life was a daily battle against being poor and not knowing what would happen. Ray Norris, Chuck's dad, was a mechanic, a bus driver, and a veteran of World War II. He also had his own problems as a kid, and Chuck saw him deal with them. Ray's drinking made the family life unstable, which left deep scars on young Carlos and his two younger brothers, Wieland and Aaron. The family relationships were stressed when Ray wasn't there. The mental and real worlds. He would disappear for days or even weeks at a time, leaving Chuck's mother, Wilma, to hold the broken family together with all the power and resources she could muster. Fear and uncertainty lived in that house all the time, and the sound of the front door opening could either make people feel better or worse. In a strange way, the young boy who would become a worldwide action star was very shy and quiet. Kids at school picked on Chuck because he was short for his age and had a thin build. He had problems with feeling inadequate, which were made worse by the fact that his family was having money problems. Other kids at school seemed to have no trouble making friends, but Chuck felt like he wasn't seen. He was stuck in a shell of fear that made every day feel like a test of survival. Neither was he athletic nor friendly. He wasn't the kind of child that anyone would have thought would grow up to be a symbol of power and masculinity. Chuck was 16 years old when his parents' difficult marriage finally broke down. Ray and Wilma got a divorce, which was painful but also made the family feel better. Wilma moved the boys to Prairie Village, Kansas, so they could start over and get away from the bad memories and problems that had shaped their lives in Oklahoma. After that, they moved to Torrance, California, where it was warmer and there were more chances for a better future. For Chuck, these moves meant both trouble and opportunity. California was very different from rural Oklahoma. It had huge scenery and a growing economy. Chuck went to North Torrance High School in this new place, but most of his classmates didn't know who he was. He wasn't very popular or sporty, and he didn't feel very good about any part of his life. The shy kid spent a lot of time by himself, daydreaming about things that seemed so far away. He did odd jobs to help his mom pay the bills, and he knew even then that everyone had to help his family stay alive. Living in poverty taught him how important it is to work hard, but it also made him feel like he was less important than other people. Of not needing some unspoken standard that everyone else seemed to do without any trouble. The quiet drive that was starting to form in Chuck Norris during those hard years could not be seen by anyone. The bad things that happened to him didn't break him, instead, they made him stronger in ways that would surprise everyone. Unstable, poor, and full of self-doubt, his childhood helped him develop the emotional toughness that would later define his personality. Though he felt helpless at first, the boy was slowly realizing that strength and power could be earned and that one's birth circumstances did not have to decide one's fate. When Chuck Norris made a choice in 1958 that would change the course of his life forever, it was a turning point. Chuck joined the Air Force when he was 18 years old because he didn't know what he wanted to do with his life. The choice he made was partly based on need and partly on his desire to give his life meaning and order. The service gave him security, a steady income, and most importantly, a chance to break free from the restrictions that had shaped his youth. What he didn't know was that this choice would lead him to the practice that would turn him from a shy and nervous kid into one of the great martial artists in the world. Chuck was sent to Osan Air Base in South Korea, which at first seemed like a normal assignment but would turn out to be fate. In the late 1950s, Korea was still getting back on its feet after the terrible war that had split the country in two. The country had a lot of old customs, like martial arts styles that had been improved over hundreds of years. As a police officer in the Air Force, Chuck had a lot of spare time. During these peaceful times, he first saw Korean troops practicing Tang Soo Do, an old style of martial arts that mixed strong strikes with smooth movements and deep philosophical ideas. He was immediately drawn to something about the exercise. He may have been drawn to the discipline, the accuracy, or the way that practitioners seemed to exude confidence that he so badly wanted to have. Chuck began to learn Tang Soo Do. He then learned Taekwondo and Karate, putting so much effort into the exercises that even his teachers were shocked. He had finally found something that made him feel strong and capable. The shy boy who had been picked on at school learned that he could get respectable skills by working hard at them. He learned a lot of different punches, kicks, and forms. Each one was not only good for his body, but also helped him rebuild his personality. The change did not happen right away. Chuck trained hard all the time, often working for hours longer than what was needed. He learned not only the physical moves but also how to keep his mind in check, which was an important part of martial arts. Someone who had spent his childhood feeling inferior really connected with the idea of always improving oneself. In the dojo, skill and commitment were more important than rank and background. Chuck learned that he was naturally good at martial arts, but what was more important was that he worked hard enough to beat people who were better at the start. He had become a completely different person by the time he got out of the military in 1962, having won black belts in many different martial arts. When Chuck Norris got back to the United States, he wasn't the shy kid who had gone to Korea. He was a good martial artist who was sure of himself and had a goal. When he moved to California, he got a job as a quality control worker at Northrop Corporation, but he wasn't really interested in normal work. He felt like martial arts had sparked a desire inside him that couldn't be tamed like a hobby. Chuck opened his first karate school in Torrance in 1962. It was a small building that would grow into a huge martial arts business. His schools quickly became known for being excellent and well-run. Chuck was a tough but fair teacher who pushed his students to do better than they thought they could, just like he had done for himself. He taught that martial arts weren't just about fighting, but also about building character, learning self-control, and getting stronger on the inside. His way of teaching got serious students, including some who would go on to become famous entertainers and martial artists. Steve McQueen, Bob Barker, Priscilla Presley, and Donny Osmond were some of his famous students. They went to Chuck because he was becoming known as one of the best teachers in Southern California. But Chuck wanted to do more than just teach. He started competing in karate tournaments, which was a trend that was becoming more and more famous in the United States. His success as a competitor was nothing less than amazing. After winning many titles and establishing himself as a fighter of great skill and discipline, Chuck Norris became one of the most decorated martial artists in history. He became the professional middleweight karate champion in 1968 and held the title for 6 years in a row. This was an unheard of feat that made him a legend in the martial arts world. His style of striking was fast, accurate, and based on planning ahead. Chuck wasn't the biggest or strongest fighter, but he had learned to read his opponents and take advantage of their flaws very quickly. He carefully watched his opponents and trained for matches with the same level of dedication he had shown during his first training in Korea. His success in competitions made him famous outside of martial arts. 10 years ago, it would have seemed impossible for the shy boy from Oklahoma to go through those doors. Even though Chuck Norris had a lot of great fighting experience, he didn't go from being a martial arts champion to a Hollywood actor right away or easily. An unexpected connection led him into the movie business and would become one of the most important ties in his career. In the late 1960s, Chuck met Bruce Lee at a karate contest. The two martial artists became fast friends because they respected each other and had similar ideas about how to fight. Already, Bruce Lee was making waves in Hollywood by fighting against the ideas and rules that Asian artists had to follow. He also saw a similar spirit in Chuck, someone who knew more about martial arts than just the physical techniques. Because Chuck and Bruce Lee were friends, Bruce Lee cast him as the main bad guy in The Way of the Dragon, 1972, which is also known as Return of the Dragon in some countries. The fight scene at the end of the movie, which took place in the Roman Colosseum, became one of the most famous martial arts scenes in movie history. Chuck, who was playing Colt, fought Lee's character in a fight that showed how good both fighters really were. The fight was planned to show how different their styles are, with Lee's fluid, adaptable style going up against Chuck's strong, straight style. Because the scene was filmed with few cuts, viewers could really see how good both guys were at martial arts. This part brought Chuck Norris to the attention of people all over the world, but it was also hard. He was known as the person who fought Bruce Lee, which was both a good and a bad thing. The sudden and sad death of Bruce Lee in 1973 shocked the whole world. He left a hole in martial arts movies that many people tried to fill. Chuck was at a crossroads because he wasn't sure if he wanted to become an actor or keep working on his popular karate schools. He was already in his 30s, which is pretty old for someone who wants to become an actor, and besides his martial arts demonstrations, he had no official training in performance. Still, chances started to come up. Chuck made a big step forward when he starred in Breaker Breaker in 1977. A low-budget action movie where he got his first lead part. The movie didn't do well with critics, but it showed that Chuck could carry a movie and that people wanted to see him fight on screen. More importantly, it taught him important things about the movie business, like how to time, angle, and use theatrical elements to make screen fighting work. He learned the difference between doing martial arts moves in a competition and doing them for a camera. In 1978, the movie Good Guys Wear Black was his big break. It set the Chuck Norris formula that would define his success. He played John T. Booker, a former leader of special forces who wants justice for his dead soldiers. The movie had both martial arts action and conspiracy thriller parts, which gave Chuck chances to show off both his fighting skills and his acting skills as a leading man. Even though his acting was still a bit stiff, his naturalness and physical prowess made up for it, giving him a unique screen image that people found interesting. The movie made over $30 million at the box office, showing that Chuck Norris could be a bankable action star. Because of this success, A Force of One came out in 1979 and made the Chuck Norris name even better. He played a karate champion who helps police look into killings that have something to do with martial arts. The plot kept him true to his roots while making him more popular. The movie did well at the box office, and each job made Chuck feel better about his acting skills. He was becoming a film presence that was all his own, not like Bruce Lee's charismatic intensity or other action stars' over-the-top violence. Chuck seemed calm and sure of himself. A feeling that he didn't need to brag or act tough because his skills spoke for themselves. In terms of movies, the 1980s were Chuck's best years. He played the lead role in The Octagon in 1980. The movie was based on ninja lore and had fight scenes that got more complicated over time. After that, in 1981's An Eye for an Eye, Chuck played a tough San Francisco cop who wants to get even. A theme that would show up in many of his movies. But it was Lone Wolf McQuade in 1983 that really caught lightning in a bottle. The movie, which was directed by Steve Carver, starred Chuck as JTJJ. McQuade is a Texas Ranger who doesn't follow the rules. His martial arts skills and tough personality help him do this. One of Chuck's most well-known movies was Lone Wolf McQuade. Making a lot of money at the box office and laying the groundwork for his most famous part, which would come later. With his beard, cowboy boots, and tough attitude, McQuade became the typical figure that people thought of when they thought of Chuck Norris. There were action scenes that people will remember, like the one where Chuck's character drives his truck out of a grave, which became a famous image in action movies. The success of this movie showed that Chuck had found his niche. He liked playing tough, independent heroes with traditional American ideals who were also good at martial arts. He did best with sales, though, with the Missing in Action series, which began in 1984. Chuck played Colonel James Braddock in the first movie, which was directed by Joseph Zito. A soldier of the Vietnam War who goes back to Southeast Asia years after the war is over to free American prisoners of war who are still being held there. The movie hit close to home in the United States, where the Vietnam War was still a source of national trauma and unresolved feeling. People who wanted to believe in heroic redemption were deeply moved by the idea that American soldiers had been left behind. The movie Missing in Action was a huge hit with audiences. It made more than $22 million in the US and led to 2 sequels. Because these movies did so well, Chuck Norris became one of the biggest action stars of the 1980s, up there with Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Jean-Claude Van Damme. His movies always followed the same pattern. Chuck would portray a military warrior or police officer with martial arts skills who overcame huge challenges by using fighting skills, tactical intelligence, and a strong sense of right and wrong. There were times when critics said these movies were too simple or violent, but audiences loved them, and Chuck built a loyal fan group that liked how he made action movies. By the beginning of the 1990s, Chuck Norris had proven himself to be a steady action movie star. But things were changing in the entertainment world. The market for action movies in theaters was getting more crowded and expensive as budgets rose and companies demanded bigger shows to compete. Chuck saw that television gave him a chance to connect with viewers in a more lasting and personal way than 2-hour movies could. The idea of Walker Texas Ranger was one of the best decisions he ever made for his work because it helped him think strategically. Chuck became a societal icon thanks to this show, which ran for 8 seasons. When the show first aired on CBS in April 1993, Chuck not only played the lead role of Cordell Walker, but he was also an executive producer, which gave him a lot of creative power over the show's direction and content. Walker was a lot like the GJJ in many ways. McQuaid from the book Lone Wolf McQuaid. A Texas Ranger who used both standard police work and martial arts skills to fight crime all over the Lone Star State. The character had old-fashioned ideals like honor, justice, and respect for the law, but they used very modern fighting styles to catch criminals. It worked out great when conservative ideals were combined with big, exciting actions. Walker Texas Ranger was different from other action shows of the time because it was honest and moral. In each show, Walker and his team, which included Clarence Gilliard as his partner James Trevette and Sherry J. Wilson as his assistant district attorney Alex Cahill, faced off against different criminals and dishonest government officials. There was no moral conflict or deep character studies in the show. Instead, it had clear heroes and villains. Walker was a nearly superhuman force for good who always beat evil through a mix of martial arts skill, detective work, and unwavering moral belief. The show was known for its action scenes, especially the fight scenes where Chuck would show off his martial arts skills against several opponents. These scenes stuck to a routine that was easy to guess and enjoyed. Where Walker would try to settle disagreements quietly at first but would have to fight criminals if they wouldn't give up. The fights were planned to show off Chuck's real skills. His signature move became roundhouse kicks, which he executed with the speed and accuracy that made him a winner decades earlier. The makers of the show knew that part of the reason people watched was to see Chuck fight, so they made sure that these moments happened often. The show Walker, Texas Ranger, quickly found its fans and was one of CBS's most famous in the middle to late 1990s. The show did especially well in reruns, where episodes were shown to people who might not have seen them when they first aired. The action-packed plots and simple stories of the show made it easy to watch episodes out of order, which was great for the broadcast market. From 1993 to 2001, it had 8 seasons. The show had 196 episodes, which is a lot of work. Chuck Norris had more screen time in those episodes than in all of his movies put together. A lot of people thought of Chuck Norris and Cordell Walker as being the same person. People directly connected with Chuck because of Walker's traits, such as his quiet confidence, his devotion to traditional values, his skill in martial arts, and his role as a guardian of the innocent. The show boosted Chuck's public image, which he had been building up over the course of his film career. It made him look like a model of moral power and masculinity. For millions of watchers, especially those in Middle America and rural areas, Walker portrayed an idealized version of police work and manhood that spoke deeply to their values. The show's popularity went beyond just being fun to watch. Walker, Texas Ranger became a huge hit that changed society in ways no one expected. Because the show was so sincere and Chuck could only do a few things as an actor, it was easy to make fun of and spoof, which ironically made it more popular. The Chuck Norris facts internet meme trend, which started in the middle of the 2000s, was based a lot on Walker's character and the amazing skills he showed on the show. These funny facts, like the one that says Chuck Norris doesn't do push-ups, but instead pushes the earth down, went viral and presented Chuck to younger people who hadn't seen any of his movies or TV shows. During the whole run of the show, Chuck was incredibly consistent in both how he performed and how fit he was. Making a TV show is a lot of hard work. With tight schedules and long hours that make actors work week after week without the long breaks between jobs that film actors enjoy. Many of Chuck's stunts and fight routines were still done by him, even though he was in his 50s for most of the show's run. His level of fitness and determination impressed both the cast and crew. He was able to keep up the physical presence that the part required thanks to his martial arts training and strict way of life. The show also gave Chuck a chance to talk about things he really cared about. A lot of the shows had plots that were about fighting drug abuse, respecting the police, helping veterans, and sticking to traditional family values. As executive director, Chuck made sure that the show had messages that he thought were important. This made Walker, Texas Ranger, more than just a fun show, it was also a way to teach morals. There were people who thought the show was preachy or overly simplistic in its worldview, but this approach made Chuck popular with people who liked entertainment that shared their beliefs. In 2001, Walker Texas Ranger finished its run, making it one of the longest-running action shows in TV history. Millions of people watched the show's ending because they were still interested in how Walker's story would end, even though the show was over. It continued to have an effect on culture through syndication, DVD releases, and finally streaming services, which introduced the character to new generations. In 2005, CBS made a TV movie called Walker, Texas Ranger, Trial by Fire, which brought Chuck back to the part and did well in the ratings, showing that both the character and the actor are still popular. During the Walker, Texas Ranger years, Chuck Norris was at the height of his mainstream fame and societal impact. The show made him famous all over the United States, taking him from being an action movie star to a name that almost everyone knows. It kept him financially stable and kept him relevant in an industry that often gets rid of old action stars. Walker, Texas Ranger was more than just a hit TV show, it was the most important part of Chuck's career. The persona that would always be linked to his name and reputation. Even though he has given the impression of being unbeatable throughout his career, Chuck Norris has had serious health problems and personal problems that have put the toughness he learned as a child to the test. His body eventually gave out after decades of doing martial arts for years on end, both in competition and on screen. His many kicks, punches, falls, and stunts that made his acts seem real hurt his bones, muscles, and joints over time. It became more and more clear to Chuck as he got older that his lifetime of physical worry had hurt him. Regarding his health and fitness, Chuck had always been very disciplined throughout his work. He knew that his ability to work depended on his physical skills. His body was his most important professional asset, and he took care of it like it was something valuable. He stuck to strict diet plans, trained regularly, and dodged many of the bad habits that got other action stars in trouble. He almost never drank booze and never smoked. He was just as dedicated to his nutrition as he was to his martial arts training. He was able to work well into his 60s thanks to this discipline. Long after most action stars had switched to parts that required less physical strength. But even the best-kept body can't completely avoid the effects of getting older and getting hurt more often. Chuck hasn't talked much about his health problems because he wants to keep up the strong public image that his fans expect from him. He has said in comments over the years, though, that he has had ongoing joint problems, mostly in his knees and hips, which are places where martial arts techniques put a lot of stress. The repeated impact of thousands of kicks over many years caused injuries that needed medical help in the end. Chuck did less physical activity in the years after Walker Texas Ranger, but he was still much more active than most guys his age. He kept up a workout routine that was changed to fit the needs of his changing body and taught martial arts on occasion. For someone whose identity had been so closely tied to physical ability, the change from high-impact stunts to more moderate exercise was hard. Being able to accept his physical limitations was just as hard for him mentally as it was physically for a man whose whole sense of self was based on being very strong and capable. One of Chuck Norris's most well-known health-related scandals wasn't about his own health problems, but about worries about his wife. Chuck married his second wife, Gina O'Kelly, in 1998. In 2013, she had several MRI tests with gadolinium-based contrast agents. Gina had very bad and painful symptoms after these treatments, such as burning sensations, muscle weakness, and thinking problems. She and Chuck came to think that she had gadolinium toxicity, a condition in which the heavy metal used in contrast agents builds up in the body and is very bad for health. Chuck became very worried about Gina's health. Spending an enormous amount of time, energy, and money to find treatments and raise knowledge about the possible dangers of gadolinium-based contrast agents. During conversations, he said that seeing his wife suffer was one of the hardest things he had ever done, harder in many ways than any physical fight he had been in. The man who had played unbeatable heroes on screen couldn't do anything about his wife's mysterious and painful sickness. He spent millions of dollars on medical care, going to different centers and talking to doctors all over the world to find treatments that worked. After researching several drug companies that made gadolinium-based contrast agents, Chuck and Gina sued them in 2017. Seeking millions of dollars in damages and bringing heavy metal retention from medical imaging treatments to the public's attention in a big way. The case said that these companies did not give patients enough information about the risks of gadolinium retention and the bad effects that could happen. Gadolinium toxicity was still debated in the medical community, with many doctors saying that the contrast agents are safe for most patients. Chuck used his fame to push for more people to know about the dangers and for stronger warning systems to be put in place. The world saw a different side of Chuck Norris because of this event. The tough, independent hero he played on screen was nothing like him in real life. He was weak and deeply affected by his wife's pain. He was honest about how scared he was seeing Gina's health get worse and how frustrating it was dealing with doctors who didn't believe the gadolinium overdose diagnosis. His willingness to talk about these problems made him more real than in any of his action parts, showing that even the toughest people have times when their strength alone isn't enough. Aside from the gadolinium issue, Chuck has also been open about the mental and emotional problems he faced as he got older and stopped working in the field that had defined him for so long. End of Walker, Texas Ranger, and fewer movie parts as he got older made him think about who he was and what he was here for, which is something that many older people do. Who did Chuck Norris become when he stopped showing off the physical skills that made him famous? How does someone whose public image is based on being strong and capable deal with the inevitable loss of power that comes with getting older? Chuck got some answers to these questions by getting closer to God and spending more time with his family. In different interviews, he has talked about how important religion is to him and how his Christian beliefs give his life stability and meaning beyond his work. This spiritual side, which had always been there but was more in the background when he was an action star, became more and more important to his public image. He started writing books that were a mix of autobiography and spiritual and philosophical reflection. Instead of just promoting entertainment projects, he used his stage to talk about his values and beliefs. Because Chuck has had physical problems, it's important to remember that the body will eventually break down, no matter how well you train or take care of it. Accepting his limits takes a different kind of strength from the ones he showed in movies and competitions. He built his identity around his physical abilities. Chuck's journey through his own and his wife's health problems has shown a strength that goes beyond martial arts skill. It has shown the mental and emotional toughness that lets people adapt and find meaning even when things change drastically. In addition to his health problems, Chuck Norris has also lost loved ones, which has tried him in ways that no physical opponent could. The man who seemed unbeatable on screen learned that tragedy and grief don't care about a person's reputation and that strength and determination alone aren't enough to win some fights. These losses changed him deeply, giving a public persona that had been mostly marked by toughness and martial skill more depth and compassion. On September 2, 1970, Chuck's youngest brother Waylon was killed in battle during the Vietnam War. This was the worst loss of his life. He was only 27 years old when he died in Vietnam while serving with the 101st Airborne Division. His family called him Willie. The brothers had been close their whole lives. They had shared the hard things that happened to them as kids and helped each other through the problems their family was having. Willie looked up to Chuck and was moved by how his bigger brother had changed after learning martial arts and serving in the military. When Willie chose to join the army and go to Vietnam, Chuck was both proud and very worried about his younger brother. The war was tearing America apart, and Willie was going to be a part of it. When Chuck heard that Willie had died, it broke him in ways that not many people saw. He had already made a name for himself as a martial artist and was looking into acting jobs. When he got the message that every military family dreads. The Vietnam War itself was a tragedy that many Americans saw as pointless and sad, which made the killing even worse. Chuck had problems with anger, grief, and a lack of control that were very strange for someone who had spent years training and disciplining themselves to deal with physical difficulties. He was very good at martial arts, but it couldn't bring his brother back or make the pain of miss him go away. Willie's death changed Chuck's view of the world and later affected the jobs he chose. He made some of his most popular movies with missing in action. These movies weren't just for fun, they were also personal statements about Vietnam and how veterans are treated. Chuck dealt with his sadness and feelings about his brother's death by making movies about heroes who save soldiers who had been left behind. The part of Colonel Braddock, who won't leave his men behind, was like an idealized version of Willie's rescue, which could never happen. People connected with the movies in part because Chuck had a real emotional connection to the subject. Over the years, Chuck has talked about how the death of Willie taught him that life is short and people we love can die without notice. He became more grateful for his relationships and vowed to make the most of the time he had left with his loved ones. He got more active with veteran issues and has always been there for military families, knowing from personal experience how hard it is to lose someone who served your country. Willie's sacrifice still had a big impact on Chuck's life. He never fully got over the loss, but it became a part of who he was as a person. When Chuck's other brother, Aaron Norris, got sick, it added to the sadness of losing Waylon by another family member. Aaron lived and went on to have a great career as a director and producer, working on many of Chuck's movies and directing many episodes of Walker, Texas Ranger. However, his family worried about his health at times, which made them remember how painful it was to lose Willie. Aaron's survival and success gave Chuck some relief, but the thought of losing Aaron stayed with him. In 1958, Chuck married Diane Holchak. They were married for 30 years before they got a divorce in 1989. Divorce is not the same as death, but it does mean the end of a relationship and the life that two people had made together. Chuck and Diane had been married since he was in the Air Force. She had seen him grow from a shy soldier to a martial arts winner to an action star. They had two boys together, Mike and Eric. Diane was Chuck's rock during the tough early years when he was building his karate schools and trying to make a name for himself in competition. Chuck felt like he had failed as a person when his marriage ended after 30 years. He valued trust and commitment. By Hollywood standards, the split was friendly, but it was still a hard time in Chuck's life. He hasn't said much about the exact reasons why they are no longer together, because he values Diane's privacy and doesn't want personal matters to be seen by everyone. In interviews, he has said, though, that the long hours he has to work on film sets and the long distances he has to drive for work put a lot of stress on his marriage that couldn't be fixed. The event taught him about the consequences of being successful and how work can get in the way of personal relationships. Chuck finally found love again with Gina O'Kelly, a former model, after his split from Diane. They got married in 1998. While Chuck was in his late 50s, they had twin girls named Dakota and Dana Lee. They were happy together. He was able to be more present and involved with his younger children than he had been with his older children when he was busiest with his work. He became a father again at that point in his life. But, as we already said, Gina's health crisis from gadolinium poisoning brought new worries and problems into their lives, putting their relationship to the test in ways neither of them had planned. Chuck has also lost parents, teachers, co-workers, and friends over the course of his life, which is a normal part of getting older. His mother Wilma, who had kept the family together through his hard childhood, died. She was the live link to his roots and the struggles that had made him who he is today. Even though Chuck and Ray had a rough relationship and Ray wasn't a good parent, Ray was still Chuck's father, and his death marked the end of a painful episode. All of these losses, which happened over many years, made Chuck feel heavy with sadness, even though he kept up the public image of being strong. The death of Bruce Lee in 1973 was a big deal for me personally and professionally. Bruce wasn't just a co-worker, he was also a friend who knew a lot about martial arts and how hard it is to make movies that look like real fights. His quick death at age 32 shocked Chuck and everyone in the martial arts world. Bruce's death made Chuck think about how unpredictable life is, as well as how important it is to enjoy the time we have. It also made Chuck one of the main heirs to the history of martial arts movies, a duty he took very seriously throughout his career. From the tragic death of his brother Willie to the end of his first marriage and the deaths of friends and family, these losses gave Chuck Norris depth that wasn't always clear in his action parts. They showed him that real strength is more than just being strong physically, but about being able to deal with mental pain, keep going even when grief seems like it will get the best of you, and find meaning in life despite the losses that you will inevitably face. The man on TV who could beat any opponent learned that some of life's hardest problems can't be solved by fighting them. Instead, they need to be accepted, worked through, and finally turned into wisdom and compassion. At 84 years old, Chuck Norris has moved on to a more peaceful but still active time in his life. He mostly lives in Texas with his wife Gina and their twin girls, who are now young adults. Chuck is still very busy and involved in the world, even though he doesn't do the high-flying martial arts moves that made him famous. He puts his energy into projects that he cares deeply about instead of projects that make him money. Chuck's main focus right now is on his family, especially being there for his daughters Dakota and Danielle in ways that his busy job didn't allow him to do when he was younger. He has talked about how much fun it is to watch them grow and develop their own hobbies and how satisfying it is to be able to be there for their activities and big moments without having to worry about film schedules and production deadlines all the time. This focus on home life is a big change for someone whose life has been full of action and steady movement for so many decades. In addition to spending time with his family, Chuck spends a lot of time volunteering and helping others. Because he served in the military and because his brother Velen died, he is still very committed to helping soldiers and their families. He works with a number of groups that help soldiers who are having a hard time with injuries, mental health issues, and the adjustment to life as a civilian. Because he is famous, he can bring more attention and money to these causes than most people can. There are also more and more efforts by Chuck to get kids to learn martial arts, especially through his Kickstart Kids program, which he started in 1990. The program takes martial arts to middle schools all over Texas. The structure and discipline of martial arts training help at-risk teens build character, self-discipline, and confidence. Chuck sees this work as a full-circle moment because he is using the martial arts that changed his life to help young people who are going through problems similar to the ones he had as a kid. Over the years, the program has helped hundreds of thousands of kids, and Chuck is still very proud of it. He is more well known these days through social media, books, and a few public events than through movies and TV shows. Online, Chuck is often seen and heard talking about his religion, family values, fitness for seniors, and political issues. In the past few years, he has written a number of books that are both autobiographies and intellectual reflections. These books share the lessons he has learned over the course of his 80-year life. These works show a more thoughtful side of Chuck Norris that was always there but got lost in the spotlight because of his action star image. Although Chuck has changed how he trains to fit his age, he still manages to keep an amazing level of fitness. Even though he doesn't do the spinning kicks and acrobatic moves he did when he was competing, he still works out regularly and does martial arts in modified ways. He is now a supporter of healthy aging and tells everyone to stay busy and involved no matter what age. He does this by showing that vitality doesn't have to end when you're young.